It's Ask the Mayor today on KWBE with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. And our morning announcer, Dave Needfelt, wanted me to ask you if you play Powerball, and did you win anything, or did you get any numbers?
Well, let's put it this way. I am $2 ahead of the game.
You didn't buy a ticket.
I didn't buy a ticket.
That's good.
You know, sometimes they always put out those little odds.
Yeah.
And when I read that I had a greater chance of getting killed by lightning, I decided my $2 investment might not be a good investment.
Probably could be better used on some other option or something. But somebody in Los Angeles is pretty rich right now, or some people. But,
yeah, they are. And that just brings a whole other set of headaches for them.
Yeah. They may wish that, oh man, now I got to hire 2 or 3 lawyers and 3 accountants, and it's more work than I thought. But
probably something we'd probably just gladly deal with if we want, I'm sure.
Just be another one of life's challenges, I guess. Well, on to things of the city of Beatrice today. We had a long meeting Monday in between the work session and the council meeting compared to ones you've had, but you had a lot of topics on there to talk about, and in the work session was the progress report from Pinpoint Communications on the fiber project. After hearing, all the discussions, the questions and answers, pretty satisfied with how it's going?
Yes. I think that, anytime you put in a utility, there's, some things that we just have to do. I mean, they basically did the southeast part where I live first, not because I'm mayor, don't want to, no, just because that's just where they started. Yeah. And, the bottom line is that the easement or the right-of-way is where they're putting the utilities. And I think it was an opportunity to learn. Some people wonder why, are you, coming up as high as you do in somebody's yard, which happens to still be right-of-way. Why can't you put it there? And when you think about the right-of-way, there's a lot of, particularly in some of the newer neighborhoods, there's a lot of buried other utilities there. And so as they lay fiber, or if they laid, electric lines or plumbing, you have space that you have to have in between each one of those utilities. Mm-hmm. And so, it's taking up another space for this, utility. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, as I look at a lot of other communities, I think getting fiber into the community is an absolute winning thing for all of us. I think that the communities that don't take that step to get fiber now will have some real challenges getting it in as other companies expand. And so we're happy, with the job that Pinpoint's doing. If you look at the construction company, I think they actually subcontract with T&H, and I know that T&H has been doing a pretty good job responding to people who have some concerns. Mm-hmm.
It didn't appear that, just from the discussion Monday night, that there was a whole lot of complaints or questions, but there are some once in a while.
There are. I mean, it's tough. I mean, when you have a vault put in your yard and you really like your yard, it's all of a sudden there. But overall, it's gone very well, and I think that they're doing a great job. And I think from the local perspective, I think it's really nice that they're going to have their own office here. Mm-hmm. And so, I think Windstream's got an office here. You've got Pinpoint, who's got an office here. Other utility companies may have moved to Lincoln, and then it just becomes another challenge for all of us to make that trip to Lincoln to get services.
Other companies have been making broadband improvements over the past years, but ever since it kind of became a focus of part of the infrastructure initiative at the federal level, and the programs like the Bridge program came about, it seems like you're seeing more and more companies step up coverage of certain areas of Nebraska.
And there are. And, Pinpoint has actually been around for a while. Mm-hmm. If you do some of the research, you'll find that, they're based out of Cambridge, Nebraska, and they have a number of places over in Nebraska City, Beaver Lake, a lot of smaller communities. I think we're probably one of their larger communities that they're going into, and I think they'll do a nice job.
Okay. The initial committee reports you received Monday night, the one that deals with the Dempster property. Then there was the one that takes a look at ordinances, nuisance things like that. And then the downtown redevelopment. Let's just take maybe a quick comment on each of them.
Sure.
The big one out there appears to be the Dempster one because it's been said before that this is going to take several years.
Yes. That committee's done a nice job. It's headed up by Ted Fairbanks, and they actually, we call it a field trip. They took a field trip to basically to the state to find out all about the wonderful things it takes to get rid of a building that has, some environmental issues. And I think they've got a good game plan of what needs to be done. I think like with any meeting with the state, there's a lot of acronyms. And I think they all kind of walked away and said, okay, now what did they say? But I think they did a good job of kind of coming back and helping them at least get started on a project that what we ultimately knew and we have to get a hold of is we have to own all the parcels of the property before we can make a lot of progress. And that can take some time. Typically, to get that property, you buy it through back taxes. Those back taxes, I think, are coming up again within another year. And then there has to be a waiting period of about 2 or 3 years, and then we own it. And so, I think right now the committee is saying, okay, we know we have that issue, but what can we also do to continue to improve that property so when we take it over, we're ready to go?
Yeah. If you, on the tax sale certificate process, and being that it takes at least 3 years or so, as you kind of acquire those one by one, can you kind of then just focus on that one as to taking it down? Would it be kind of a phased approach, or what could you say about that?
The two, yes, you can. I think the issue becomes how much environmental issues do you have and how much it's going to cost to clean it up.
Yeah.
And in some of those instances, it could be, maybe $500,000.
Yeah. When we took the tour with you and the council and Chet McGurry at the plant some weeks ago, it was interesting, first of all,
Yes.
looking at it. But the area where it was fenced in, where the contaminated stuff was being kept in barrels, is that all gone now that you know of?
That should be gone within the next couple of weeks.
I see.
I know they finally, and that's the thing that probably I didn't know until we had some small things at the college we had to get rid of. And then this particular stuff, you have to find a place that will actually take it. And most of the time, as long as it's identified, you can find those places. I think they found some stuff that that was unidentified but knew it was hazardous material. So it took a while to find a location, and I think they found that location. I'm not 100% sure if it's gone yet, but it will be shortly.
One of the points of emphasis I know Ted talked about, and I just want to get your reaction on it, is once you start into the process and start taking it down, or actually kind of prior to that, how important is that, what you're going to do with it later, part of it? As far as the state or federal government is considered, do you need to have that all kind of settled ahead of time?
I believe, and I think Ted made an excellent point. In some respects, you start working on this project backwards. And what we do with it and how we utilize that land, basically, it's kind of like recycling in a lot of respects, but only the ground. And I think he and the committee have looked at some things about how do you take it maybe like a multi-use area, so that area we replace is not just recreation. It could also be native grasses and some other type of functions for the community. Probably the hardest thing would be is to build anything there.
Yeah.
As far as green space, I think there's a great opportunities, and I think that's a great place to start. And I think you'll, the next year or so, you'll see some maybe plans of what we would hope it would look like.
Yeah.
But yes, starting at the back end, and the reason you want to start at that back end is when you apply for grants, they're going to say, okay, that's fine, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And the more detailed you've got of what you're going to do with it, probably the better opportunity you have for the grant.
Councilman Gary Barnard gave the report on the rules ordinances study thing. Anything stand out for you on that? As obviously, there's our initial reports, and committees are just kind of getting into this now. So.
They are, and we started with nuisance properties, and that's so tough. I think the committee has actually looked at several other communities in Kansas and Nebraska, and it comes down to, you've got different rights depending on, everybody, if you live by somebody, they've got rights and you've got rights, and you've got to figure out where that happy medium is. Luckily, we've probably got 90% of the community where that's not an issue, but we do have 10% where it is an issue. And so you kind of try to figure out, well, what can we do and what can't we do? We have found out that our nuisance ordinance is written very well, but, it doesn't identify some of the smaller things like, well, how many lawnmowers can you have? Well, that's pretty tough to determine, so they're weighing through a lot of that. But we're finding that as far as the actual writing of the nuisance properties, we'll take a look at issues like grass. Should it be notification be sent at 8 inches or 12 inches? I think there's some refinement we can do, and Gary and the committee are doing a good job weighing through that. But at the end of the day, it's tough. It's tough to figure out how do you enforce some things on other people's property, and it's just a tough road to hoe. And in most cases, you have, when you have neighbors that get along, it's probably not a big issue, but that's not realistic. Yeah. You're going to have areas where there's going to be conflict. Okay. Some of those might go civil, and some of those we try to do the best we can.
Best thing to do is get cooperation of all parties, but that doesn't always happen.
That does not always happen.
The third committee report, Terry Doyle, councilman, giving it on downtown redevelopment, and he emphasized one thing about Ella Street, between 4th and 6th, maybe paying some attention to that in relation to making that area more, I guess, business-friendly, pedestrian-friendly. And we're going to talk about, after a break here, the Court Street Corridor project coming up, too. Sure. But what were your thoughts on Terry's report?
Well, we have $400,000 that we got in a grant to make some improvements downtown. And if you take a look at the areas 4th and 6th that was identified on Ella, what the committee's going to look at is a drawing that kind of starts incorporating some of the ideas of what the master plan of the Court Street corridor would actually look like. So with that grant, we really didn't want to put things on Court Street if we're going to do, the master plan. Yeah. And it's really an opportunity and a chance for us to really showcase what the downtown can look like, and it sure will give a shot in the arm to those areas. So I think that's a great opportunity for us.
All right. We'll be back on Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment. We're back on Ask the Mayor today with Mayor Bob Morgan. We were talking about the committee reports earlier and moved to the Court Street Corridor Master Plan now, which you got to look at on Monday night from the consultant that did that work, Olsson Studios, I believe it was. Obviously, the cost figures for not only the plan, but for the moving of the highway are pretty significant, and I know that kind of perhaps bums people out a little bit when you look at those numbers, but where do you go from here on that plan?
Well, first step is, we're going to need to adopt the plan through a resolution. And what we saw on Monday night, again, I kind of tell people, that's the concept. Typically, once you get a concept and you approve that concept, then you would maybe go into the design stage. And then, design stage, I think we heard Monday night, that can be anywhere from a year to 3 years. Yeah. And a lot of that depends on how much money we get from the state or for federal government and what studies need to happen as we move forward. So, in the past, we've had, probably since 2011, we've had 3 studies on Court Street. And I think this city council is in favor of trying to figure out how do we do something for Court Street and how do you make it a pedestrian-friendly downtown. So the first step would be to pass a resolution that accepts the main plan, kind of the concept. As you think about it, it's kind of like, well, these are boxes on the plan. It doesn't really, you don't really say what's in that box until you get through the design phase. And then after we adopt the concept, I think at that point in time, you ask yourself, okay, how much is it going to be for the design stage? And when do you do that design stage? And there's a couple of thought processes there. It's probably easier to get grants if you've got a project that's near shovel ready, meaning it's ready to go, and they can see what your concept is. Kind of like the same concept as you had with the Dempsters. What are you going to do with it afterwards?
Yeah.
But again, that design phase could be, $500,000 to $750,000.
Yeah.
And so as we go through our budget, some decisions need to be made. Where do you get that money, and is that the next step?
Yeah. I think the cost range estimates on the corridor itself were $3.5 million to about $4.8 million, somewhere in there.
For the completion, yes.
Yeah. And then the highway move, over $10 million, but what's the prospect of that being a state project where that would have much of that cost covered at that level? Obviously, you would probably have a share of that, but...
Right. Those are conversations we're going to have. I mean, we're going to try to find as much grant money and as much assistance from the state as possible. So we'll enter those conversations probably as early as the next month, so we kind of can start defining where that gap is.
The concept had at 2nd and then at 8th Street on Court a couple of roundabouts as entry to the pedestrian-friendly area. Anytime you mention the word roundabout, for some reason, Armageddon is going to befall everybody, and it's, and I know people don't like them, and some people like them, and some are probably indifferent to it. But why do you think they draw so much, angst when they're brought up?
I to be real honest, probably most of it's age. I mean, if you look at the demographics of who likes the roundabouts and who doesn't, it's people that have driven through with stoplights and stop signs all their lives, and now we're looking at a whole new concept of how you get around. There's no different with me, but what is it? I think you're ever in Lincoln and you go from 56th Street to 84th Street on Yankee Hill, you really that'll teach you how roundabouts work, because there's supposed to be 5 or 6 of them there. Yeah. But in this case, the 2 roundabouts really give the community a great opportunity for marketing. So as you're driving down the road, a roundabout's going to slow you down but not stop you. So you have a way to get through town if you want to continue to go through town. But it's also going to get you the opportunity to look down the corridor and say, that's kind of an interesting concept. Why don't we find a parking spot and walk through? Yeah. And you're finding a lot of communities where that does happen when people are just out on a Saturday or a Sunday and they go for a drive and they become a destination. So at 2nd Street and 8th Street, you're going to have the opportunity, especially with those roundabouts in the middle of those roundabouts, to really promote your community.
And then with the parking part of the concept being parallel on one side and diagonal on the other side, not like 5th Street with the shorter spaces, but longer diagonal spaces, seems to be some value in that for just kind of increasing capacity.
There is. And, by taking the heavy traffic off of, Court Street to Market Street, you park and then you have that freedom to go across the street and not worry about a semi coming barreling through. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is right now today. But now with that additional parking, you really have an opportunity to park and just kind of stroll through, the downtown community from 2nd Street to 8th Street.
Mayor Bob Morgan with us today. We'll wrap up our Ask the Mayor program in just a moment. Back to finish up Ask the Mayor today with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. Maybe just touch on a few topics here. Paddock, Kensington. I know Michael Southen, the executive director for Main Street Beatrice, gave a report on kind of what's going on there. And there's been some interest from potential developers, but anything of note from that conversation that you took out of that?
There's a number of developers who've been through the building. It's coming down somewhere first part of August. They have to actually put their request for qualifications or proposals in. I think the biggest takeaway is what can the community do for the developer and the developer do for the community, and how big a money gap is there. And so, it's a pretty good sized building that needs renovated. So until we get those RFPs, we really don't know where we're at, but I will say that Michael has done a really great job of finding developers and showing developers the building, and we'll want to try to see how we can utilize that property. I guess the good thing is we control the building, and so as we look at prospects to redevelop that building, we know that someday it's going to be in good hands.
Yeah. How much is there in terms of potential or prospect for multiple developers taking different parts of the building or something like that? Is that at all possible or not?
I don't know if that's possible. That's a question I can't answer. I think that becomes more difficult because they all want their little piece of the pie. Construction might be kind of a headache too as you try to redevelop that building about who, because, utilities and wires run across the whole building.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good thought.
Well, just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah.
You never know.
Good thought.
So I hadn't been by there yesterday, but of course the work's been going on, the trail connection between 24th and 26th. They did have it poured, at least, I think, most of it. Is it just now kind of up to smoothing it out, landscaping it? Or
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Letting it cure.
Yeah.
Yep. We're about done there.
Yeah. So that'll be a nice little addition. At least you'll have a walking or a biking option between some businesses there and the high school now.
Yes, that's really going to be. That's one of those things we're glad we finally just got it done.
Yeah. Seems like good progress on the convenience operation that Todd Heido and his company's doing. So
Yes.
a lot of activity going on out there right
Absolutely.
now. Yeah. So tomorrow it goes before the Community Redevelopment Authority for our last time. You approved it Monday night. The council did, and that's the Kinney Holdings Precise Fabrication TIF plan that they are going to expand out there. Nice project.
It's a great project. We're very thankful for Kinney Holdings and the move that they've made for precise fabrication and combining some other businesses and choosing to expand in the industrial park. And the TIF project, TIF is always a great opportunity for the city to try to help people out as they expand. And I think that, again, helps that industrial park. It helps the city of Beatrice, and it's just going to be really a nice addition to the community.
And I think, don't they take up pretty much all that land between them and, what is it, Zephyr, the next
Yes.
business up north on the, Ridgeview Drive?
I believe it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
right there, so, yeah.
So yeah. It's great to have a company, and it's great to be able to have a tool to help that company grow in Beatrice.
It will be interesting, too, if they go forward with it. They had talked about an on-site daycare for their employees, and maybe maybe a little of the test case as to whether or not that works well or how that works out.
Well, I think it's a great idea. One of the things you're finding is, there's a labor shortage,
Yeah.
and one of the labor shortage issues is the fact that you need good daycare to be able to allow two people to work, so yeah, I think it will work. I think they've thought that whole process through, and I think that's another exciting part of the project as it comes to fruition.
Yeah. Monday night, you also continued your series of department heads coming to the council because you have some new members
Right.
on the body, and you've been with the council but new as mayor, so you chose to have them come in and kind of talk about what each department does. And James Burrows, his city engineering department, and then also the wastewater pollution control department, which he is superintendent of now. He went through the whole process, and as I tell you, and before when we talk about this program ahead of time, I always learn something out of these.
Absolutely.
Even though I've been here for, I don't know, since World War II or whatever. But the thing that kind of struck me, and I knew about it, but kind of impressed me, is how much everything is GIS. Everything's mapped out in town as far as facilities, locations of things, what's in there, how old it is, where exactly it's at. Kind of helps in planning, doesn't it?
It helps in planning, and it helps when we have an issue.
Yeah.
And you can kind of identify that issue a lot quicker. And that's the other exciting thing about bringing fiber into the community, is that part of the contract, Pinpoint has to provide fiber to facilities of all the facilities that the city has. And so, with a fiber ring connected to all of our places, we're able to use that GIS, and we're able to use a number of programs more efficiently for engineering and, of course, for the WPC. And when you think about it, also across all the other departments of the Board of Public Works.
Yeah. You recently received news that the new 5-year operating permit for the wastewater pollution control, the sewer plant, has been approved. And a lot of people may not realize it, but the fact that it was approved with not much change from what
Right.
you had, That's probably going to save a lot of money, I would imagine.
That is going to be a significant savings in the millions.
Yeah.
And it also gives us, the credibility that we're running our WPC plant is in good shape and good working operations. And I was kind of amazed as you learn about, again, I learned things too, as you learn about the process and how we're using, if I remember it right, to break down things, we're actually using bugs and insects.
Yeah.
And so, and then at the end of the day, a lot of what we break down is reused. So there's a huge part of, if you want to call it recycling, that's being done, and a number of things held off the dump to make compost. So, when you looked at the whole process of what James said about the WPC, I just found it fascinating about how we're already really reusing a lot of the waste product that comes into our plant.
And then the water that's discharged eventually back into the river is, some would say, cleaner than it is in some lakes and ponds around southeast Nebraska.
Might be a little cleaner than the water that's already in there.
Yeah. The one thing, too, that you did, the city did several years ago was introduce the use fee on sewer usage to try to build up a reserve to do some of the improvements you've done. How important was that decision, do you think?
Oh, very important. And it's actually becoming more important now. I think we put in a grit screen and a number of other things with that money. But, there was a period of time, not that long ago, where bonds and interest rates were pretty low. Well, in today's dollars, if you have to take a $2 or $3 million project and pay 5 to 6%, you're going to pay for it for a number of years.
Okay. Mayor, thanks very much for being with us today. I think we get a little bit of a break from meetings next week or two. So
we do. The next city council meeting will be August 7th.
All right. Thanks for being with us. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you.